Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Yagesh Bobe, and in this video, we will cover some special functions in JavaScript that you might find yourself using uh, frequently when you're creating websites or developing projects. Okay, so these are setTimeout and setInterval. It might give you a basic understanding. You might have a basic understanding of them just by reading the names. So let's actually look at them one by one. I'll give you a brief. Like for setTimeout function, what this does is it basically sets a timeout or gives a timeout or basically runs a block of code after a specific time. So you set a timer, and after the timer, that code will run, that block of code will run. That's what set timeout does. Sometimes you might not want to run a block of code right at the start. You might want to give some pause and then you might want to run the code, and that's where set timeout function is used. So let's try to implement set timeout. Okay, now in this set timeout, as you can see here, we have to give the handler, and again we have to provide the timeout. So for here I'll just give an arrow function that will just print out 1, and I'll give it a timeout of 1 second. So here you have to provide the timeout, right? And it's in milliseconds, so 1000 means just 1 second. And if you don't know what arrow functions are, if you don't know what functions are, I have a separate video on that. You can see it. Okay, I'll be creating a separate video on that. I'll post it very soon. So basically it's not confusing. You just have a block of code that is run together. Okay, like for example, basically it's just a block of functions are nothing but a block of code that can be called a number of times in the program later. Okay, anyway, so what this arrow function does is it just runs the console.log line, so it prints out 1. And what this set timeout does is it runs this code after a second, okay, and not immediately. So you see the code ran a bit late. For example, I'll just print out early here and late here, and I'll position this above the early one, right? And now, logically speaking, since the programming languages follow top-down approach, right? This should run first and this should run later, right? But when I run this code, you'll see that early is printed first and late is printed later. Why is this happening? Because we have set a delay. This set timeout basically sets a delay that anything inside this block of code, anything provided here will be run after this timeout. I can increase the timeout to be like 5 seconds or maybe anything you want so that it's more noticeable. Early is printed, then after 5 seconds, you'll see that late will get printed here, right? So that's what timeout is used for. Now, the other function that we want to cover is setInterval. Okay. Basically what this does, it runs a block of code after a set interval. Like I provide a block of code, I give it a function, and I want to run that function again and again after every 5 seconds or maybe after every 10 seconds. Something like this is where set interval is used. So if I write set interval, again the basic syntax is very same. Okay, so I'll give the handler, I'll say that I want to again and again print out my name maybe, right? Or my channel's name. So this will get printed, and I have to set the interval as well. So I have to print, let's say in 1.5 seconds, I'll run this code again and again. Now, when I run this code, you'll see after every 1.5 second, developer zone is getting printed. And if you think that you've covered enough, there are so many topics, and how will you remember this stuff? Then you don't need to worry, because you don't have to learn this stuff. You're not sitting in an exam, you're not sitting in a school, you're just learning this, right? You don't get marks over this. You don't have to worry a lot. You can just go just do a simple Google search, set timeout and setInterval in JavaScript, and just read about them on different sites, right? Geeks for Geeks and W3 schools are pretty awesome resources. So you can just go read about them. You can just try it out in their editors as well. This is a good way of learning, right? And I would prefer you do it this way. Now, coming back, you might question, like, how do we stop this interval, right? If we just set the interval, there has to be a way to stop it. So what we do is, the setInterval function returns us a value. Okay, I can store it in the interval id variable, and if I log it out, you see all these things are printed, right? Not just a number, a special timeout class is getting printed. Now let's stop this code. You can do that by Control-C. And if you want to stop it, you have a function called clear interval, and similarly you also have a function called clear timeout. So you can clear that timeout by using that. So in clear interval we pass the id. Okay, so you just write interval id, and this will just clear your interval, right? If I run this code, so now if I run this code, you'll see that nothing gets printed. Why is this? Because we set an interval here, but in 1.5 seconds this clear interval is already run, so our interval gets closed already. So if you want to see that clear interval does work, what you can do is set timeout, and let's say I give it an arrow function which basically just has this clear interval function inside it, right? And I want it to run after, let's say, 5 seconds. I want to run this after 5 seconds. So in 5 seconds this should run approx 3 times, right? So when I run this code, you'll see developer zone gets printed 3 times, and after that the code stops. So this is how you can use clear intervals. That's just one way of using it. You can even use clear interval inside the set interval itself. You can use it directly right here. That's totally doable. Okay, but that's just playing around with this, and you can do that yourself. And we'll just stop here. That's all for this video, and I'll see you guys next time.